Hey guys, how's it going? When I created this Shisha with Sahil Instagram account, I mentioned at the time that I'd be discussing sports, movies, TV shows, entertainment, but also some more serious, maybe controversial topics. Well, that time is now. What I wanted to discuss was something that's been in the news very recently, and there's quite a lot to unpack. So this may be a slightly longer video, so bear with me, and hopefully you'll kind of get my point of view. And at the end of it, if you have any questions or comments, you can comment on this video that I'm going to post on IGTV. So let's begin. What I wanted to discuss was, first of all, the firing of James Gunn. Now, James Gunn, for those of you who don't know, is a prominent Hollywood director. He most recently and most famously is known for directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Volume 2, and he was also going to direct Volume 3, which was scheduled to be released in 2020. Now, the reason I say he was going to direct Volume 3 is because he is no longer going to direct Volume 3. And the reason for that is he was fired as of Friday morning, this Friday just gone. Now, that's a pretty big step. He was fired by Disney and Marvel Studios, who own the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. Both movies were extremely successful and did really well in the box office, did really well in terms of critical reception, particularly the first volume. So why would Marvel Studios and Disney take such a big step? Because, you know, we're talking about a director who everyone respected from the franchise. So why would Disney take such a big step? Well, the reason they took such a big step was because some tweets emerged from 5 to 6 years ago that James Gunn tweeted. Now, I'm not going to read out the tweets. They're pretty offensive. And if you really want to know what was said, you can Google it and they'll come up on your Google search. But they were really offensive tweets, and they were a lot, and they basically talked about rape and pedophilia, along with quite a few misogynistic remarks, which, to be fair, he has later apologized for. But these tweets were highlighted once again on Thursday, and on Friday morning, Disney and Marvel Studios didn't hang around, and they straight away fired James Gunn from directing the third volume of Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, you've got to appreciate and understand why Disney would do this. You know, we're not talking about a alcoholic beverage company or a UFC. We're talking about Disney, one of the biggest, most well-known brands and companies in the world. But more importantly, they have a very clear demographic, and that demographic is families and young kids. If you go to one of their theme parks, Disneyland, wherever in the States, you can actually go on a Guardians of the Galaxy amusement ride. And those amusement rides cater to young kids. So, to be fair to Disney, they didn't want their franchise and their brand to be associated with someone who, albeit some time ago, tweeted these offensive comments. Which, from a business point of view, you can kind of understand. You can kind of understand why they made this move. So that should give you some context. Now, the next part of this story is that it didn't just end there. It didn't just end with the firing of James Gunn. Ever since then, Twitter has absolutely exploded. Full of people from the Marvel family, from the Guardians of the Galaxy family, from actors, from people in the Hollywood industry backing James Gunn and expressing their dismay and shock that he's been fired. But not just people from the Hollywood industry, a whole lot of liberals have come out and supported James Gunn and have been completely against his firing. Well, you'd wonder, why are liberals getting involved? Well, the reason liberals are getting involved is that James Gunn is very much a liberal. He is not shied away from that fact. If you go on his Twitter account, you will see that apart from tweeting about Hollywood and his movies, he regularly criticizes Donald Trump. He regularly criticizes the right-wing conservatives. He regularly criticizes Republicans in general. And he's never minced his words. He constantly makes fun at the expense of right-wingers in general. So he's very much a liberal champion. Liberals love him. He's one of their key spokespeople on social media, and particularly in Twitter. So the liberals didn't like the fact that one of their own is now suffering. But there's another aspect to that. The other reason why liberals are up in arms is because the person who brought these tweets into the spotlight last week was a guy called Mike Cernovich. Now, if you haven't heard of Mike Cernovich, again, you can find him on Twitter. You can find him plenty of articles about him on Google. He is very much part of the alt-right movement. And that's not me calling him alt-right. He himself calls him alt-right. He himself calls himself alt-right. And he's got some really right-wing extremist views, really abhorrent stuff, vile stuff. Again, I'm not going to go into all the things he's said and done, because quite frankly, I don't want to give him more time or attention than I absolutely have to. But it's all documented. You can go look him up. So this guy, Mike Cernovich, who's a big Donald Trump fan, he loves right-wing policies, some really extreme policies. He reposted these tweets from James Gunn on Thursday, and he pushed them to the forefront. And then his Twitter following, his right-wing following, started retweeting and retweeting and retweeting, and as a result, Disney acted upon it. So that is what liberals particularly are angry about, that you've got someone right-wing with really awful, nasty views who has ignited this feud and has, in their mind, caused James Gunn to be fired. I saw a video clip this morning from the Young Turks, who are a huge YouTube digital platform. And on there, their main anchor, Cenk, did a whole segment about this, about James Gunn and Mike Cernovich, but he spent almost all of it talking about Mike Cernovich and all the things he said and why he's targeting James Gunn, etc., etc. Now, I don't buy that. Whatever you think about Mike Cernovich and about the alt-right and about the right-wing and the extremists, the white supremacists, whatever you think about them, they didn't write James Gunn's tweets for him. They didn't hold a gun to his head and said, right, James Gunn, you're going to tweet all these offensive things. James Gunn did that himself. So you can blame the alt-right for a lot of things, but you can't blame them for James Gunn being fired, because at the end of the day, he tweeted those things and he has to be held accountable for those things. Whether you believe he should have been fired for it, that's a different question, and I'll come on to that in a bit. But I don't subscribe to this, that it's the right wing and the alt-right's fault and Mike Cernovich's fault that James Gunn got fired. Not at all. That brings me on to the next point, and this is kind of the crux of what I'm going to analyze, or what I wanted to analyze today, and that is the type of social media universe we currently live in. And when I say social media, right now I'm predominantly talking about Twitter, because Twitter is the forum where you can pour your heart out, you can tell people about your beliefs, your opinions, for the whole world to see. So in this context, for the realm of this discussion, I'm specifically talking about Twitter when I say social media. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the liberals, or the left-wingers, whatever you want to call them, have won the race, have won the battle to dominate social media. I don't think that's an opinion. I think that's pretty close to a fact. If you, for example, if you if you follow the UK trends, which I do, having lived in the UK for 20 years, I like to see what's trending in the UK. Whenever we come around to an election or any kind of referendum, you will notice hashtag vote Labour will be trending. You'll never see vote Conservatives, you'll always see vote Labour. And anything conservative will be negative. You'll say down with the Conservatives, anti-conservative tweets, trends, whatever you want to call it. Whether it's about Brexit, whether it's about the election, whether it's about economic policy, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about austerity, you name it. Social media will be rife, full of pro-Labour tweets and anti-conservatives tweets. You'd be forgiven to think that that demonstrates what the whole of the UK is thinking, but as we saw with Brexit, that's not the case. Remainers lost, Brexit won. In the last two elections, Labour lost. Conservatives didn't win the last election, they got the most votes. And in the election before that, they won with a majority. So social media doesn't represent the populist view. But it's certainly influential, and you can see that the Liberals have definitely won that. If you check out the American trends, you will see a lot of anti-Trump tweets, you will see a lot of pro-Democrat tweets, you will see a lot of pro-Hillary tweets, you will see a lot of pro-Bernie Sanders tweets. Anything to do with the Republicans, anything to do with Trump will mainly be negative. So that's why I say that the Liberals and the left-wingers and even the feminists have really dominated Twitter over the last 4 or 5 years. So what I'm about to say may offend some of my liberal friends, some of my left-wing friends, maybe some of my feminist friends. But this is how I feel, and if you disagree, feel free to message me or comment. You cannot have it both ways. I'm addressing liberals now. You cannot have it both ways. You need to decide what social media, what Twitter universe you want to live in. I'll give you some examples of outrage that's been whipped up by liberals online the moment someone, and when I say someone, it typically is a man and it typically is a white man. When someone has said or done something even mildly politically incorrect, the liberals have jumped on it and they've whipped up this social media frenzy and outrage that has resulted in people having to apologize, people breaking down, people losing their jobs, people's careers suffering. I'll give you some examples. I think 4 or 5 years ago, there was a scientist, I believe his name was Matt Taylor. He was a Rosetta Stone scientist. It was a project where a satellite reached a comet, did some things and came back, and it was a huge deal. It was the moment of his career, and he was on TV the moment the satellite reached the comet. But unfortunately, he made the mistake of daring to wear what we in the UK would call a Leary t-shirt. And this t-shirt depicted half-naked women all over it. Now, these were just cartoon women, but they happened to be half-naked. Of course, the feminists and the liberals couldn't stand that. The outrage got whipped up. Social media, Twitter went into a frenzy, and lo and behold, next day he was forced to come back on camera, and rather than talk about this fantastic scientific achievement, he was forced to apologize. He broke down in tears, and he apologized for daring to wear this t-shirt. 1 or 2 years after that, another scientist, Sir Tim Hunt, Nobel Prize-winning scientist, was giving a lecture in Korea, I believe, and someone asked him about his views of women in scientific laboratories, and he made some stupid and offensive remarks that women in science cause male scientists to fall in love with them, and then the scientists break up with them, and then the female scientists end up in tears. Something stupid like that. He shouldn't have said it. Afterwards, he came and apologized and said that it was tongue-in-cheek, it was a joke, similar to what James Gunn said about his tweets, but that wasn't enough. His career has went into complete meltdown, and he hasn't worked at the same level ever again. That was 4 years ago. Moving to the media industry, when Carrie Grace, who died, there was an outpouring of emotion from all the Hollywood fraternity. And Steve Martin, the American comedian who's good friends with Carrie Grace, wrote a tweet, a 140-character tweet, where he paid a mini tribute to her. And in there, amongst the compliments, he said the words, "She was a beautiful creature." And that went down like a lead balloon. Again, the feminists, the liberals jumped on it. There was a frenzy. Outrage poured out, and lo and behold, 24 hours later, Steve Martin had to apologize because apparently you can't compliment a woman based on her looks anymore. Ryan Gosling was accepting a award for La La Land. I don't remember what award it was. It was an American award, and he accepted the award for Best Actor for La La Land, and he made the mistake of thanking his wife, Eva Mendes, for looking after his kids and being a great mom and a great wife. That didn't go down well because you cannot limit women to being a mother or a wife. Again, he had to apologize. Henry Cavill, very recently, I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago, was asked in an interview about relationship with women, and he made the mistake of saying, well, he's quite old-fashioned and he likes wooing women, but in this day and age, he feels nervous in case he's called a rapist. He probably shouldn't have said that, but if you think what he said was stupid, you just need to look at what happened to Aziz Ansari, who has now been labeled a racist, and I haven't seen or heard of him since that whole scandal happened. Again, people jumped on Henry Cavill, feminists jumped on it, liberals jumped on it. He had to issue an apology 24 hours later. These are just some examples, okay? There's many more examples. You can Google them and find a plethora of examples. But this is my point. When you've created this Twitter universe for yourself, by yourself, where no one can say or do anything that's remotely politically incorrect without either having to apologize or having their career disrupted or losing their job, you then cannot complain when one of your own suffers. James Gunn is a liberal, but does that mean he's exempt from your own rule of thumb? Because what he said was deeply offensive. So why should he be held to a lower standard? Just because he's a liberal, just because you love him, because he's anti-Donald Trump and he's anti-Republican and he's anti-conservative? Isn't that double standards? Isn't that being hypocritical? You have to pick a lane. Either you live in a social media universe where everyone is held to account, and the moment they say or do something remotely politically incorrect, they have to be taken to task for it, or you live in a social media universe where if someone tweets something, instead of just jumping on the bandwagon and demanding and foaming at the mouth and demanding their head, you use some sense and you use some reason and you use some logic and you use some context. You see what their career has been apart from that one moment. You see what they have been about apart from that one tweet. And you judge them based on that rather than a 140 or a 280 character tweet, and you destroy their lives because of it. But you have to decide that, and I'm aiming this to the liberals because you guys control and run social media. You have to decide what social media universe you want to be a part of. Because it can't be one rule for a right-winger and one rule for a left-winger. The same rule that applies for James Woods, for example, has to apply to James Gunn, for example. So this is basically what I wanted to say. This video's run a bit long, we're about 20 minutes into this. That's kind of the gist of what I wanted to say. I hope it's made sense. There's a lot to unpack, and I could probably talk for another 10 minutes, but I don't want to go on and on and on. If you have questions or comments, comment below this video. I'm going to put it on my IGTV. Let me know what you think. If you don't want to comment and you just want to send me a private message, send me a private message. I don't care. All opinions are welcome. This is not about who's right or who's wrong. This is just my view. I've been thinking about it long and hard, and if you have something to say it to my face, say it on social media, I don't mind. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe.